back up there for a moment and remind you. Healing often is a process of you removing the codes that don't belong there for your healing and implanting in you instead the codes that do. Now that is something the human being is learning to do. And they're learning to do that automatically. They're learning to do it from others. They sit in the circle of 12 and information is given to them, perhaps about the blocks to release and the things to go in and out. Question: is innate then involved in that process? Yes. Innate is a whole lot bigger than you think. Is innate spiritual? Could it be spiritual? There are some who have asked, is innate in the pineal gland in your head? Because the pineal gland is often been seen as that which is the window to your soul, perhaps the place where your higher self would connect. All of these suppositions about where something might be. Say, where is the wire that goes from you to your soul? Oh, how linear. The answer we've given many times before, it's not in one place, that wire that connects you. It's all over. It's heart, brain, pineal. It's more than that trio that I just said. It's everywhere. You might even say it's a field. Is innate spiritual? This brings up a question whose answer we're going to give you in lesson number 4, and that is hidden things about the innate. If you study where the innate is, it's going to slow you down. My partner learned a long time ago that he had to dive into metaphors. I gave you one. Where is love? Here's another one. Where is one of the strongest forces that you deal with every single day, one of the highest energies that you'll ever experience, that never needs sustenance, that's always there, and it's called gravity. Question: where is gravity? Number 1, is it real? Of course it's real. Number 2, does it affect you? Of course it affects you. Number 3, therefore, it's energy with substance, it's physics. Where is it? The answer is yes. It exists everywhere on this planet. That is what gravity is like. You might say the attributes of gravity is that it's everywhere, all the time, and you deal with it, and you learn about it, and you work with it. Welcome to the attributes of innate. If you can understand that this grand energy that is always with you could actually, ready, be part of your soul. When we cross the bridge to the circle of 12, does innate come with you? Now, careful. You're going from the three-dimensional body feeling to a multidimensional soul feeling, and I'm going to give you the answer. Does innate come with you? That body, that smart body, that the one that knows all about your chemistry and all about your blocks, does it come with you? And the answer is, oh yes. In fact, when you are on the other side of this bridge, going from the 3D side to the multidimensional side, when you're in that soul energy, innate is enhanced tenfold, because suddenly you're looking at the process of your own healing, the discovery of your own blocks, and innate knows it all. Innate is far bigger and grander than you ever thought. It's not just a smart body that responds to kinesiology or homeopathy. Innate may be the biggest healing force that comes with you at birth and stays and maybe even extends itself. We'll talk about that. That is innate. Beautiful, grand, And the answer, where is it, is yes. I am Kryon, in love with humanity. And so it is.
And in your own time, and when you are ready, you may open those beautiful eyes if you've had those eyes closed. And very slowly and softly bring your awareness back into your body. Bring your awareness back into the room. And we're going to move to the next part of our program and be talking to a very special guest. One of the things I always remember Kryon talking about is that when we're not here and when we're on the other side of the veil, we have the mind of God. And that's where our soul planning comes from, that mind of God. And why I'm so excited is that our next guest, Rob Schwartz, helps us to connect in with that soul planning that we had when we had the mind of God. And so, Rob, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you for having me as your guest. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, well, honestly, we are so delighted. Lee and I are just wonderful that we have someone who is talking about all the things that Lee's been channeling for 30 years.
I'm busting my buttons on this one because we have so many times said something that's very difficult for people to hear is that perhaps what's going on with your life right now, you might have planned it, or there might have been planning around it before you got here, and we just get stared at so many times because it's a difficult premise.
Yeah.
We have truly someone who is an expert in this and has lots and lots of years. Rob Schwartz is a hypnotist who offers between lives soul regressions. Now that's abbreviated as BLSR, to help people heal and understand their life's plan. In the BLSR, you can speak directly with the Council of Elders, wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who can tell you what you planned for your current lifetime and why, how well you're fulfilling your plan, and how you may better fulfill that plan.
Now, Rob's first book is called Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. And it explores the pre-birth planning of physical illness, having disabled children, deafness, blindness, drug addiction, alcoholism, the death of a loved one, and accidents. Now, his second book is called Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. And that one explores the pre-birth planning of spiritual awakening, miscarriage, abortion, suicide, caregiving, sexuality, adoption, having pets, poverty, mental illness, and other life challenges and experiences. And his third book is called Your Soul's Love, Living the Love You Planned Before You Were Born. Now, that one is about pre-birth planning of challenges related to romantic relationships or their absence and more.
It deals also with infidelity, impotence, raising children alone after death of one's partner, being single, even celibate relationships. Rob's books, and this is not surprising, been translated into 25 languages. Rob teaches internationally on the subject of pre-birth planning. Venues such as the United Nations, Guipala, 1440 Multiversity, Hollyhock. He offers an online workshop called Awakening to Your Life's Purpose and Discovering Your Life's Plan. There's a lot more that we could tell you about Rob. Welcome, my friend, to our program today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
How did all this begin, my friend? Go to the beginning.
Yeah, it began back in the year 2003. At that time, believe it or not, I was in the corporate world. I have an MBA, and I was self-employed as a marketing and communications consultant, basically doing different kinds of corporate writing. I found that to be tremendously unfulfilling. I used to say to people at the time that I had the feeling if I fell off the face of the earth, my clients would hardly even notice I was gone. They'd just plug somebody else into that role and carry right along. But at the same time, I had the distinct sense that there was something in particular I came to Earth to do, but I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't sure how to figure out what it was. And so I tried very conventional routes at first. I went for career counseling. I took the Myers-Briggs inventory, all that kind of thing. And that was interesting, but it didn't really tell me what to do with my life. Then I went to friends and family and I said, I'm really unhappy doing this corporate work. What do you think I should do with my life? That, by the way, is not a good question to ever ask another person. They all advised me to do what they were doing for a living, which really was not very helpful. Yeah. So nothing was working. And then I thought, well, okay, I've got to think outside the box here. What can I do to figure out my soul's plan, so to speak? And this idea came to me, go see a psychic medium. Now, mediumship is not part of my background. At that time, I wasn't even sure if I believed in it, but nothing else was working. So I thought, why not? I'll give this a try. So I go into this session with the medium, and right out of the box, she says to me, your spirit guides are here. And I said, what is a spirit guide? I'd never even heard the term before. And she explained what a guide is. And then she said, your guides would like to speak directly with you. She started to channel them. This was my first introduction to channeling. And they said to me right away, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I'll tell you, I just shook my head and I said, well, why in the world would I have done that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now, what was really impressive and what really caught my attention was that they then launched into this detailed discussion of what my challenges had been and why I had planned them. And they knew what all of them were without me telling them anything about myself. So that persuaded me that there was something going on here that I should pay attention to. And then in the days and weeks after that session with the medium, I kept thinking about this pre-birth planning perspective constantly. And for me, it created quite a deep healing because it allowed me for the first time to see deeper meaning or deeper purpose to the most challenging things that had happened. And then I thought, well, if it can create this kind of healing for me, it can create a similar kind of healing for other people. And from that point, things started happening one after another. I met some very gifted mediums and channels who became my collaborators in the 3 books. Later on, took the training to do between lives regressions, which is another way to get at this kind of information. And so about 3 years after the session with the medium, I came out with Your Soul's Plan. It's interesting how life works. For the whole 3 years I was writing it, I had no idea if anybody was going to be interested in anything that I was writing, but I felt compelled to do it. And then sure enough, when Your Soul's Plan came out, it turned out a lot of people were interested in it. And now I have a completely different and much more fulfilling life.
I love that.
Was this all done through hypnotism?
It's a combination of hypnotism and sessions with mediums and channels. Actually, in the first 2 books, Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift, it's only mediums and channels. Then I took the training to offer Between Lives Regressions. This is the field of life between lives regression that Michael Newton started back in the 1990s. And then I used that in the 3rd book, along with the mediums and channels, to get at this kind of information.
When you look at the list of things in your books that cover, I don't think you've left anything out of what we experience and why we experience it. Is there one that sticks out to you that might be one of the hardest ones for people?
Suicide is really tough. In that particular chapter, I worked with a medium in the Netherlands who channels Jesus. And I asked him at the beginning of the channeling session, is suicide planned before we're born? And he said, it's not ever planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility or a probability, or rarely a probability so high as to be almost certain. And then he stepped aside, and a young man named Cameron, who had taken his life, came forward. He is the son of the woman I was speaking to for that chapter. And he comes forward and he explained that he was experiencing extreme depression and anxiety and really just could not tolerate that state anymore. And so it prompted him to take his life. But he speaks directly to his mother and he says to her, you did not fail me. You are not responsible. I alone am responsible for this choice. And those are the kinds of comments that are made most commonly by people who have taken their lives when they're contacted through mediums and channels. So we continue with this discussion about suicide. And what comes out in the discussion with Jesus as he comes back in, I think is probably the single most healing piece of information I've come across in all the years I've been doing this work. And what he shares with us is that every suicide that could have been prevented by outside forces was indeed prevented. That's a direct quote from him. And what he's talking about there, and what he explains to us, is that if a suicidal person has the slightest openness or willingness to change their mind, spirit knows and spirit stages an intervention. So if someone completes an act of suicide, there was literally nothing anybody could have done to change their mind. It means that they had no openness or willingness to change their mind. And when I share this information with people that, every suicide that could have been prevented was prevented, that is tremendously, tremendously healing to people who have lost a loved one to suicide, because for many years, they've blamed themselves. They think that they should have done more. And when they find out that they couldn't have done any more, it's just enormously healing.
Here's a question, not to put you on the spot here, but people have asked this, say, if you have a plan and you have this kind of a thing, and in the middle of your life, you choose to change it, maybe even make it something astonishingly different, is that something we can do?
It is something you can do. And the way to look at this, when we talk about having a pre-birth plan, it's not the case that there's only a plan A. There is a plan A, but there's also B, C, D, E, F, and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. The difference between these different sets of plans is the vibration or the frequency. So the higher vibrational life plans have a lot less suffering and a lot more joy. The lower vibrational plans are based more upon pain and suffering as a way to achieve growth. You can do it either way. But obviously, from a human perspective, it's preferable to have more joy and less suffering. So how do you do that? Well, it's really quite simple, although not always easy to do. The way you do it is make the most loving decisions you can make in every instant. If you ask yourself the question, what would love do now? Mm-hmm. And then do that, that will put you on the higher vibrational path.
Have you ever looked at your own life and said, okay, look at that switch you made from corporate to this? Do you think that this was plan B, or do you think you're right in plan A?
I'm pretty sure that I'm right in plan A. Okay. I think if you go back to the earlier part of my life, before I was what you could call spiritually awake, I think I was making lower vibrational, less loving decisions the first half of my life. But at age 40, which I believe was selected as part of the pre-birth plan, I awoke quite abruptly. And since that time, I would like to believe I've been making more loving decisions. And part of those loving decisions is the path that I'm on now, to bring this information about pre-birth planning to as many people as I can reach.
One of the things in Hinduism is the plan of reincarnation. And they say that once you learn something for your soul planning, you don't have to learn that lesson again. And in a similar way, Kryon has said that same thing. What's your experience with people who are coming in and having these lessons? Do you get a feeling that they might be karmically having something carry over from a past life?
My understanding is that happens quite a bit. And basically the way it happens is that if you experience some kind of trauma in a past life and you're not able to heal it in that lifetime, you will carry the energy of unhealed trauma back into body in another incarnation for the purpose of healing it. For example, in my first book, Your Soul's Plan, there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness. The deafness story is about a young African-American woman named Penelope who was born completely deaf in both ears. We went into her pre-birth planning session working with one of the mediums and actually heard the conversation that she had with her spirit guide when the deafness was planned. And what we learned in that conversation is that in the life immediately previous to this one, she had the same mother she has in the current lifetime. And in that past life, she heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. Oh. Well, that created a lot of trauma, as you can imagine. And in fact, it actually led her to suicide later in that lifetime. So she returned to spirit from that life with what you could call an energy of unhealed trauma, which now needs to be healed. In her pre-birth planning session, her guide says to her, "My dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that no similar trauma will happen to you again, and so that you can complete your healing from the last lifetime?" And Penelope responds, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." And what ensues then is a fascinating dialogue in which she and her guide work out the details of the deafness.
Is this in the book?
It is in the book.
All right. I don't want to get this away from this. It's so interesting. Tell us about BLSR, just the whole point.
Between lives soul regression is a form of hypnosis in which you, the client, or the workshop participant, can speak directly to the Council of Elders, the beings who oversee reincarnation on Earth, and ask them literally any question you have about your life. Wow. So the most common questions that people ask are, what did I plan before I was born? Why did I make those plans? How am I doing in terms of fulfilling my plan? And how can I better fulfill my plan? And as long as it's for your highest good to receive an answer, the council will answer any question you ask. So people will come out of a between lives regression and they'll say things like, "The council answered every question I asked. I have no more questions about my life." That is a transformative experience. People also comment on the great unconditional love they feel emanating from the council and the total non-judgment. And they'll frequently say things like, "I could tell that the council knew everything about me, including all the bad things I've done in my life, and yet they loved me unconditionally and completely anyway." And, that's what life on the other side is like, as you know. But for the average person who's here in a body on planet Earth, that kind of unconditional love is not something that is experienced frequently, if at all. Yeah. So when you feel that emanating from the council, it's really a homecoming of sorts.
Absolutely. So how do people connect with you or others who have been trained in your technique to receive that regression?
Well, you can just go to the website, yoursoulsplan.com. If you click on sessions in the main menu, there's a page that will come up with a tremendous amount of information about the Between Lives regression, including a 1-hour video of an actual Between Lives regression that you can watch. So the choices are to do it in a private session or in the online workshop, which I do about every 6 weeks. We do a group of Between Lives regression. The difference between doing it privately versus a workshop, in a workshop, it's not interactive. It can't be because it's a group. But in a private session, we would go back and forth in a discussion. The client would say, "The council is telling me this." And then I say, "Okay, in that case, ask them that." And we just keep going back and forth like that.
This has to be very healing.
Yeah.
Looking at actually, the information you're giving, but I would say the byproduct it's got to be healing of your soul when you find out some of these things. Have you seen any healings in your work?
It's profoundly healing. And I'll say this about the healing. A lot of the healing comes from the fact that once you really know that you planned the biggest challenges in your life, then you know that you have never been a victim and you never will be a victim. Victim consciousness, as I understand it, is literally the single lowest frequency a human being can be at. Oh, yeah. And it tends to be self-perpetuating because when you believe that you're a victim, you vibrate at the frequency of victim. When you vibrate at the frequency of victim, you are energetically stating to the universe that you are a victim.
Yes, sir.
Well, whatever energetic statement you make to the universe always responds in the same way. It always responds, "Yes, that's right, you are." So if you state energetically to the universe that you're a victim, it says, "Yes, you are," and it brings you more experiences that seem on the surface to confirm to you that you are a victim. The way to break out of that negative self-perpetuating cycle is simply to understand that you are the courageous, powerful soul who planned your biggest challenges. If you then come into some understanding of why you planned those challenges, that's actually even better, because then you can go about learning those lessons in a much more conscious and much less painful manner. And that's what the workshop and the Between Lives soul regression are all about. We get at the why. Why did you plan those challenges?
Yeah, they're very human questions. Why? Why is my life like this? How do you help people who they're a victim, but they don't even know they're a victim?
Exactly.
How does one start with that?
Realization.
Yeah.
Well, very gently and very subtly, I would never say to anybody, "You're in a state of victim consciousness," or "You're doing yourself a great disservice by thinking of yourself as a victim." I think the best thing I can really do is model in my own life what I've learned through this work, and then share stories in the books and in the workshops of people who emerged from victim consciousness by doing this kind of work. And then when people see others modeling that, and they see the kind of peace and love and joy it can bring into a person's life, then it catches their attention. And then they start to examine their own life and they say, well, maybe I'm not doing what I need to do to bring that kind of peace, love, and joy into my experience. Let me change the way I'm looking at things. And then at that point, they're open to considering pre-birth planning.
So I don't want the time to get away. Do we have a...
Well, I was just thinking, we spoke about past lives being a trauma that you carry through. What about ancestral traumas? Do you find any of those evident?
That is not something that I have specifically looked for in my work, but it does pop up every now and then in a workshop or a session. My understanding is there is ancestral trauma. It's carried forward generation by generation in the DNA.
Yeah.
And so when an individual does what they consider to be personal healing, sometimes they're actually healing the ancestral trauma without even knowing that that's what they're doing.
Beautiful.
Let's do that meditation.
Yeah, I would love if you can take our viewers through a type of meditation that allows them to get insight into their own life plan.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Go ahead and close your eyes. And then I'll ask you to visualize the place where pre-birth planning takes place. So picture a room. The walls are made of marble. There's a luminescent golden white light emanating from the ceiling, the walls, even the floor. Picture some furniture in the room and picture it in tremendous detail. What colors are in the furniture? What does the fabric feel like? See yourself touching the fabric of the furniture. Picture the room in as much sensory detail as you can. Is there carpeting? What does the carpet look like? What does it feel like? And then after you have a good visual sense of this room, imagine that all these significant people from this lifetime come into the room one by one. So your mother walks in, your father walks in. If you have siblings, your sisters and brothers walk in, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews. All of your best friends come into the pre-birth planning place one by one. Your favorite teachers from school, your least favorite teachers from school, business colleagues, and even enemies, if you consider yourself to have had enemies. Every significant person in your life walks into this room. And then what I would like you to do is scan this crowd. Notice all the faces. What you will notice is that everyone, even the people you had the most difficult experiences with, are smiling at you with genuine, overwhelming, unconditional love emanating from them. And you feel this great unconditional love for you emanating from every single person in this room. So scan the crowd, notice all the smiling faces, and choose one person to speak with, someone you would like to understand better what you planned for this lifetime with that particular individual. And walk up to him or her, take their hands and hold their hands in your hands. Thank them for coming here to be with you today. And then ask, what did you and I plan together before we were born? And keep your eyes closed and listen for the answer. The answer might be verbal. You might hear them speaking to you. It might also come in the form of a feeling. An emotion of some kind may wash over you, and the feeling itself will be a communication from the person that is intended to answer your question. Or be open to the possibility that the answer will come as a